Hi and welcome everyone to Rabbit Hole Story. And today we have another exciting guest, and that's Tania from Azteco. And you're coming in from Costa Rica. How's the weather over there?
The weather is great. I wish I could show it to you, but we live in the eternal tropics here, so it's very, very nice.
Nice, nice, nice. And you are from, like you said before hitting record, born and raised there.
That
Um, is is it's just a coincidence because it's now like I know a lot of Bitcoiners are moving there. Do you see like the Bitcoin scene emerging?
Well, it's very interesting. I think back in 2017, when I was just getting started with Bitcoin, it wasn't quite the case. It wasn't just as
Mm.
popular. Maybe because we have such a good weather and Costa Rica is probably like the third most popular place for Americans to go retire, is that we've received a lot of the community just because a lot of these people can work remote and it's a really great place, great food, no military. So overall, I think maybe that was one of the key factors, but it's really exciting for me as a local to see a lot of the Bitcoin community coming here because it just gives me more amazing people to socialize with.
Great, great, great. And if we're already speaking about your Bitcoin story, as the show suggests, how did you get into Bitcoin? How did you find out about it? And what is your rabbit hole story?
So in 2017, when I was graduating from high school, I had decided that I didn't want to go to university or just wasn't the right choice because if I had gone, I wanted to go into STEM and STEM careers just weren't quite as interesting or exciting to me. And so when I finally found through the internet, I can't remember exactly where, but through some random link, I found Bitcoin and I started to dig more into what it was, how it was working. I decided that this is something I was truly passionate about. And so that's how everything started.
Amazing. And did you have any like past experiences in, with Bitcoiners, a lot of times it's, oh, I don't know, I studied economics and I found out how bad the monetary system is, or I maybe live in a high inflation country and this is why I had to look for alternatives. Was there anything in your past where you went like, I think there's some touch points, or was it just pure curiosity which led you down the Bitcoin way?
It really was true curiosity because I had no background on anything. When I was graduating from high school, everyone was trying to see what career they like, what path they would take in life, basically. And it was like a very big decision because, for the most part, if you're going to do something, you probably want to spend a lot of hours doing that in order to truly
Mm.
master that skill or know how, etc. And so I just hadn't found something I was truly passionate about. I think I could have just studied a regular STEM career, but my parents really insisted on, but if you're not really passionate about this, is it really worth it for you to go through all the effort to try? And then 6, 7 years down the road, say, but maybe I didn't like it so much. And then it's almost like when you wait in
Mm.
line for 3 hours, you're just more likely to stay because you already spent 3 hours waiting in line, rather than if you just waited 5 minutes and you moved on. And so my parents really made the point, listen, we really want you to find a passion and whatever that passion is to truly pursue it. And so it was almost out of the gift of the internet, basically, and a lot of curiosity, going through very odd places and just truly trying to like look for something new and different, that somehow I made it along the lines of Bitcoin. And that was the beginning of a very interesting um, story for me because at the very beginning, when I mentioned Bitcoin, nobody had really read the white paper or things like that. And so, initial reaction from extended family members or friends or, I don't know, fellow students were like, but everyone's saying this thing's a scam. But this has such a bad reputation. You have I think that even it's still early for like when Jamie Dimon would used to say things like don't buy Bitcoin, but maybe Warren Buffett, just like big voices with like a lot of authority saying this is not the way. And I was like, no, but that's not it. And so there was a very, very strong pushback, especially because I had offers for Division 1 scholarship in university, which is where all my friends were going. And so I guess I really took a very strong leap in really trying to do what it is that I found passionate. And I want to thank my parents for that because if it wasn't for them, maybe I wouldn't have had enough curiosity to find Bitcoin back in those days.
Now I'm curious, with your parents being so open-minded and they encourage you, are they also orange pilled? Have you managed to get that done within the family?
I don't know if orange pill is the right word. Interestingly enough, they're not very far away. So my mother studied
Mhm.
economics, my father had studied math and computer science. So interesting enough, very close, but they weren't so much so focused on, like, yes, they have Bitcoin, they just don't, I guess they don't idealize it. They don't consider
Mhm.
themselves orange pill or so on. It just is. And I think it's kind of a healthy way of looking about it in a certain way, because you just see it like a normal person. And so
Mhm.
when everyone sees that they're the same people as before, they just like use the new phone per se, then people stop, like it, the stigma comes down. So in a certain way, I want to thank my parents for not being too geeky about the subject.
But I mean, they have Bitcoin, so that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, pretty interesting that like your parents are basically both parts or parts of Bitcoin. So the math, the cryptography potentially, and
Yeah.
then the economics aspect of it. However, today, if you look at Bitcoin, why is it that interests you the most? Is it still that technical thing? Is it the investment aspect, the savings aspect, or is it something totally different before we move into your work?
Interestingly enough, it's actually related to my work, and that's how I ended up in my job,
Mhm.
because most of it is like I've tried to find my own way or my own path, though I'm not saying it's a path that's never been walked before. I wanted to see what it is that I truly enjoyed or wanted to do the most. And so, one of the things that I really like about Bitcoin is that I think that it can solve a lot of real life problems. Here in Costa Rica, for example, if you go, for example, to a bank and you say, hey, I want to open up a bank account to do remittances, you can't do it, right? And you see people who wait 3 hours in line to try to go to a Western Union to try to do a remittance. And if they arrive post 3 p.m., something like that, because they just close early, they have to go out of we call them banana plantations. So they leave the
Mhm.
banana plantations to try to go there like in the lunch break and then go back. And if they're in the line and they didn't make it on time, they can't send money back home and they still go back to work. And you see all these things, and I'm like, Bitcoin solves this. Like, there is no
Mm.
reason why all these people doing all these lines should be doing an extraordinary effort to try to send money back home if the technology is clearly here. And if for whatever reason the financial banking system just doesn't want to do it and wouldn't open you a bank account just to send money back home, then Bitcoin. Like, I don't see why we can't just use modern day technology and help everyone kind of solve this issue. And I think it was like 8% of remittances from Costa Rica go to Nicaragua. Like, these are big numbers, and a lot of people who are like really moving a lot of money, and they just, you have like almost premature, what looks like medieval era type systems where it's like, okay, you go to someone, you give them cash, they put the cash in this like big, let's say, pocket of other dollars, and they write down X amount of cash, and then someone who is in Nicaragua who also has a big pile of cash goes give the money personally to the, like, we're using what looks like back in the medieval time era type of technology to move money, and Bitcoin can solve this. It has infamous commissions. You don't need the banking system. Anyone can just do it by scanning a QR code in their phone. It's just, everything can just be simplified overnight if people knew they could use this system. So for me, that's one of the bigger things where I truly stayed in Bitcoin is I see a lot of issues that for whatever reason are just not being addressed. And I want to be the first one to kind of solve that problem.
Yeah, sometimes it makes you wonder. So I have a lot of friends, I have family members who, used to work in banking and traditional finance or still work there. And sometimes I feel like it's almost as if this system is by design. So remittances isn't enabled, let's say, because as you said, it's technically speaking not a hard thing to enable, even outside of Bitcoin. Let's just go by the broader like fintech spectrum. But for whatever reasons, you're trying to keep certain parts of the world small. And this is where really Bitcoin is a great bridge. And this is where I think what you guys do at Azteco is really important because it changes Bitcoin from being a technology into being a real world use case for whatever reason you want to have that. So for the people not familiar with what you guys do, let's maybe start with like the 90-second pitch of what the company is all about.
So Azteco is trying to bid Bitcoin to the next billion users. And the way that we do it is by simplifying it, where you can go ahead and scan our QR code or use a $16 top up voucher in order to buy Bitcoin. Now, There are many different ways in different countries like Mexico, for example. We've managed to get a lot of distributors where you can go to a Walmart, 7-Eleven, Sam's Club, Soriana, etc. And then you can go into the physical store and pay by cash. This is a very big deal. And the reason why is because many of the people who might have struggles with the financial banking system might not necessarily be able to buy Bitcoin with a card or other traditional financial systems. So if you can just grab cash, go to a store where you know, okay, I don't have to worry about going to the right website. I don't have to worry about putting in my card and maybe losing my money. I don't have to worry about phishing or many other issues that come with technology that some people might be very frightened, especially when using or looking for the word Bitcoin online.
Mm.
They can now go to a physical store where it's like, okay, I know what Walmart is. I've been here 1,000 times. I can just give them my cash. They'll give me my receipt and QR code. I know they've handled everything on the back end. I can just scan it with my phone and I have my Bitcoin. That's a very interesting experience, especially for those who might be a bit more reserved when trying to use the internet, or just they don't they don't know how to do things, or they wouldn't know what to search for in the first place. So these kind of experiences are really important for this demographic of people.
Yeah, my mind just goes in two places. So the first place is Cuba, where I know that there is, or there has been, this government-run scam at this point, you can say, where you basically were redeeming dollars into these coupons or into these scannable items, where the government was essentially controlling the monetary flow. So I know a lot of Bitcoiners who then discovered Bitcoin because of this, because they went, well, if the government has already created a technology which makes this possible, there must be money which we control and not they control. So I could imagine that you guys probably have in a lot of these kind of countries, South America, potentially also a lot of adoption in Africa, I imagine, where people really use it as an opt-out. And then I just remembered, I think last year in Prague, it was Mike Charmouse from Lightning Ventures who had one of your terminals with him, where he was basically handing out, I think, like 10,000 sats if you want something or something. So for the listeners or the viewers on YouTube, if you really see this in person, it's quite cool. You could literally, like you said, give someone cash and they either have this machine with them or you go to a Walmart or anything. And it within like, what is it, 2-3 seconds, you basically get this printout and off you go. You have Bitcoin, which you can import to other wallets or you can hand over and give to friends and family. So is your adoption rate then more amongst these kind of economies where there really is a strong demand for, we want to get out of this and we want to use this? Or what is the balance there? Are you guys also used a lot in America, in Europe potentially? What's the breakdown there?
So obviously, the U.S. And Europe as a whole is a very big market, just based on the amount of people and money that moves around there. But I also want to focus a lot on Latin America, especially not just because I live here, but because we've seen a very large adoption. And I also want to include Brazil. Brazil is a giant that has been receiving not just a lot of attention, but moving laws forward in order to make Bitcoin more accessible. And you've seen communities that develop there that really want to use the technology. And so, as a company, we say we want to help people save, send, and spend. But most importantly, it's just allowing people to see all the use cases and how Bitcoin can solve different problems for them. And before I used a problem that was maybe more geared to someone who had a lower income. But now I can give you an example for someone who has a higher income. We have a story of a gentleman. He's on our website. He was originally from Russia. He goes to Dubai. He pays freelancers in different places across the globe. And for him, it's really important to get transactions fast. However, I don't know if you've ever tried to do a transaction over $10,000. It's not exactly efficient. And so for him, it was a lot easier and it made a lot more sense to just start using Bitcoin and paying them with Bitcoin, because for his freelancers, it was important to be paid on time and quickly. And for him, it was important to find a way to do so by not, for example, trying to send cash. You would never like try to move cash through an airport over $10,000. You can't do it. It has to be it's very, very complicated. And even through just the regular financial banking system, it might be very tedious. Sometimes the fees are very high. And so you have to do this like, okay, between you and your freelancer, how do you split the fee and who takes more, who takes less? Just uncomfortable conversations that can be easily solved through Bitcoin. And so we have different stories that kind of showcase different people's perspectives on whether it was something as simple as buying a coffee to I have a business and I get charged X amount per transaction fees for every client I take, and I could use that money to invest in a better espresso machine, for example, to sell that same coffee.
Mhm.
So we really try to give everyone a broad perspective of how Bitcoin can solve real life problems in their day-to-day life.
Yeah, funny enough, you speak about a coffee shop. I spoke to a coffee shop owner last week when I actually asked him, like, "Hey, why do you only accept cash?" Because I'm not one of the proponents or opponents of cash, so to say. It's just usually if I know people use cash, they're probably more likely to step into Bitcoin because there is a lot of synergies there. And he explained to me simply, if I have people paying under 20 euros, I basically lose money on most of these transactions because of the high fees, because of the rental fees you have to pay for the machines. So you do buy them initially, but then you pay like essentially a loan for something that costs like $20 off Alibaba or something for the producers to make. And so I started talking to him about, hey, would you be maybe also open to accept Bitcoin? Because different than what the machines are, you basically just need an app on your phone, or if you do want a Bitcoin partner, you can buy these machines once and then you can just use them until they get flashed out. And he told me, yes, he's open to it, but then sort of the typical Western perspective, but I cannot live with 50% volatility or something. And I had the same experience in El Salvador last year, where I also asked a coffee stand guy on the beach who sold iced coffee, and he was like, "Oh yeah, 50% is nothing. I come from, I think he was either Colombia or Peru, one of the two countries, but he now lives in El Salvador." And he said back home, it's like 50% is the average at home. So you're used to your money deflating this way. So having these use cases and then having you guys, I think, is fantastic. But in your day-to-day job, now I'm really curious. Like, what is it that you do at Azteco? If you could give the brief description, and do you then also get to experience talking to all of these individuals across the world?
Yeah, so I feel very privileged because I actually do get to speak to a lot of these people. More so on what I do is marketing and business development. And so anything that has to do with Spanish related content, whether that be the website or maybe short videos, just trying to help people in the Spanish ecosystem better understand how to use Bitcoin. Sometimes I give speeches at different events and so on. So just that area is something that I really take care of. And then from a business perspective, it's always trying to speak to supermarkets, telecoms, retailers, just different businesses who would be open to accept or wanting to integrate with Bitcoin. We're also very popular with gaming and gift cards. However, that's just more natural type of environment because they're just very used to Bitcoin in general. So I would say that yes, we're very strong there, but more so growing on the physical retail stores.
Great. And I just realized like it's also great utility from a privacy standpoint, because especially if you go into the whole cash exchange, there is no one asking you for your ID or can you recite a proof of residence if you want to buy these $100 worth of Bitcoin. It's literally just a quick and easy transaction between each other. Is that also an interesting angle where a lot of people come to you? I imagine a lot of like Western Bitcoiners who go like, hey, we want to buy these vouchers because we're not willing to share data.
Yes, of course. And also the regulatory departments always ask me about this as well. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of one of those things where it's like, well, if you really are just using it to get $20, and for the most part, we see that people are using this to buy coffee, just small expenses, there is no assumption of ill will. Again, there's
Mm.
a reason why cash already exists in society. If you buy a Azteco Bitcoin voucher, we only sell up to $1,000 like any other gift card. Again, there is no true license for gift cards worldwide. And so we really are just another gift card, but we're using Bitcoin. And because we use Bitcoin, we allow ourselves and we allow our customers to solve real life problems. So that's one of the nice things that I would say we have access to based on our values as a company. But moreover, I would say that being able to show people that you can use Bitcoin for day-to-day transactions and just use it as cash. Really, it's not
Mm. Mm-hmm.
it's not so much trying to escape KYC or trying to break the law, because we're very much following the law and we want to follow the law, and we want all of our business providers to follow the law, and we want all of our users to follow the law. This is not some attempt at like, oh, but if we're more private, then certainly this will allow us and give us more leeway into getting away with things. No, we don't like anything illicit. We will never participate in anything illicit. And it's a little bit funny saying it because I don't think most retailers or supermarkets or coffee shops have to disclaim this every time they accept cash for someone to just buy coffee. But because of the nature of the way the press, unfortunately, and bad actors have acted on Bitcoin, then yes, we have to give these disclaimers, I guess. But it's just, you can use cash and you can use Bitcoin, and it's not the end of the world, right? You know, you can just pay for your coffee or pay for a light bill, or you can buy a t-shirt, and yeah, you don't have to like give an entire KYC AML on why I bought my latest black collared shirt. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to just use it and see that you can be a normal human being using a new technology. And for it not to be like overly highly regulated, because obviously the business has to give a receipt that they bought the shirt. And so,
Sure.
you know, if you start looking into it a little bit and you try to, for example, do something illegal, and then you notice that Bitcoin is a public database, and if they found out which address was tied to you from some kind of governmental office that was trying to see if there was something illicit going on, most people would just be like, yeah, this is my address. You can go try to find something illicit, and you won't find anything. And so it's almost a little bit ridiculous where it's like, you don't have to over scrutinize a human being in order to realize that they're probably not doing anything illicit with the technology. Now, again, someone can go to Walmart, buy a knife, and stab someone.
Yep, that's true. That's true.
Saying the technology can't be used for evil. But Walmart and most people just assume that when you go buy a beautiful Japanese or whatever knife, you're not going to use it to stab someone. You're probably just using it to like cut sashimi, or maybe you just like a professional knife because it cuts better through the food. It just gives you a better experience. Or maybe you just needed a new one in your kitchen. Like, we don't have these like ridiculously like overly aggressive assumptions of what someone's going to do with like just basic products that everyone uses in their day-to-day life. And so I think that Bitcoin kind of has to evolve to that point where people don't just assume you're going to grab this technology and just try to use it for evil.
You spoke about Walmart now and other partners in South America. What are the discussions like with these guys, and how do you approach this? Because I could imagine if you're trying to quote unquote orange pill, I know I'm using the word a bit wrong here, but like you try to explain people as to why they should list or use the Azteco vouchers. Is there a lot of pushback, or are they pretty welcoming if you guys approach them?
For the most part, it's very interesting when you have a conversation between someone who is a Bitcoiner and a non-Bitcoiner. When you explain to a non-Bitcoiner, this is a gift card, they know exactly what you're talking about. They understand it's a gift card. When you're speaking to a Bitcoiner, they're trying to find more to it. They're like, is it a wallet? Is it an exchange? Do you accept other coins? Like, they just go into like their own little rabbit hole perception of all the things that can or can't happen, versus if you go to someone who's probably heard very little about Bitcoin or never heard about Bitcoin, if you just say, oh, it's a gift card, they understand it's a gift card. And so that's a very interesting conversation, because when you go to these retailers and you say, well, we're a gift card like any other gift card, the only difference, like, we may or may not accept Bitcoin. They're like, okay, cool. We have X amount of gift cards. These are the brands you guys can integrate here. And then start asking, okay, can it be like issued through a POS system? Okay, cool. Is it going to be a physical card? Okay, cool. And then they just like business as usual start going down the line, and they say, okay, this is the amount of time it takes to go through all the legal process. This is our due diligence, XYZ. And if there were a contract, I'll send you maybe like an MOU prior to the official contract so you can start revising it. Just normal business. So it's actually a lot simpler than people might imagine. However, convince the legal team that it's okay to use Bitcoin depends on every country, jurisdiction, restrictions, and so on. But the actual conversation within it's a gift card and accepts Bitcoin is not difficult at all. I'd say it's a lot more difficult with someone who's a Bitcoiner than a non-Bitcoiner, because they just don't have like other preassumptions of what it can or cannot do.
Do you think with the Bitcoiners it's also harder because A, they go into the whole, is it a wallet, is it a transfer, is it whatever? Or because Bitcoiners sometimes are like over suspicious. To most of us, everything is a scam immediately. Everything is like, oh, I can't use this. Is it more because of that, or are there also other things involved?
I think it's more so the overcomplication of a simple concept. Sometimes when you're used to maybe, I don't know, I don't want to use the example of programming, but when you're used to having technologies evolve and you're just kind of used to building the little plane instead of having it just shipped to you, you ask, well, is this plane attached to a tower that goes into space kind of thing?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You're just used to like finishing the puzzle and not the product just being done. And so I think that's like the bigger thing. It's almost like before you had to put the computer together and now you just open the box and you turn on the computer, which already has battery, by the way, and then you just use it. And so I think that that's kind of the difference when you have a person who's used to building the product from scratch versus when the product is already done. And that's, I think, like the bigger confusion and not so much like what is Bitcoin per se.
Okay, interesting. So we should simplify stuff and not overcomplicate stuff as a mental anecdote.
Yeah, exactly. We should just make our lives easier.
Great. And I was just thinking before, I actually didn't say it out loud. I was like, oh yeah, Azteco is essentially like Bitcoin Cash. And then I realized like, oh no, not this kind of Bitcoin Cash. I mean like cash for Bitcoin at the end of the day. Nothing of the other weird gang. Um, if you in your friend circle, before hitting record in the pre-taping, we also spoke about we don't want to talk about Bitcoin all the time, and you made the analogy to being a tennis player before. Has Azteco essentially helped you if you're trying to explain people what Bitcoin is, in getting them there faster as well? Like, oh, I can show you, give me cash and I can give you Bitcoin. I would find this immensely valuable. It's like they can touch Bitcoin essentially if they touch the voucher, if you know what I mean, and they have something physical, and then they start realizing what the powers of Bitcoin are. Has it been a help for you, or do you still see, if you're trying to explain to friends, the same struggles we all know?
Yes, I think that it actually has helped a lot because you can't just scan a QR code and then it's on their phone and they're like, oh, it's here. It's almost, and I'm like,
Mm.
yes, it was like a text message. And they're like, okay,
Yeah.
cool, I have it. And they're like, yeah. So it really does help a lot not having to, for example, go to an exchange and then you have to sign up. And then they're doing this like enormous KYC and AML. And I'm not saying it's wrong because that's what you have to do in order to comply, in order to be an exchange. But it's nice to have a different option where it's like, okay, I can just give you a little bit and now you have it in your phone. That's also pretty nice. So it really has demystified a lot of the Bitcoin. I think, again, I think the press pays a very big price on Bitcoin on saying whether it was good or it was bad or what they may or
Mm.
may not have heard from someone's opinion. And it does influence people's perspective because unlike us, they're not doing research. They just heard what they heard and they move on. And so because again, it's not part of their day-to-day life. It's not something that they were maybe necessarily interested. It's just I was at home, I turned on the TV and I heard some bad news, and while I was like going through channels, and then I'm going from CNN and then Fox News and then MSNBC, whatever, and I'm just going through my channels watching daily news, and someone said something and I just didn't think too much of it, and it just kind of stayed there, and that made a first bad impression,
Mhm.
though it might have had a lot of more like context behind it. That's not what the person heard. And so because it wasn't like this entire like thought out conversation, it does affect a little bit afterwards. And because you can just like send them, or they can just touch a voucher, scan a QR code, be like, oh, it's mine. Okay, cool. And that's it. It really, really does help a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, ironically enough, when you now mentioned the main TV networks, I know a lot of people who work at Fox News, at MSNBC, and most major outlets except CNN. I don't know the crazy people. Um, and in there, it's very interesting at the top level. So if you think about the big anchors, Gutfeld, Hannity with Fox News, Maddow and stuff with MSNBC, or Joy Reid, they are really not interested in it. They don't see the use case in it. But if the lower you go, so you go from like anchor to executive producers to the basic journalists in the background, or co-producers, and then you go into the field people, they actually get it. So ironically enough, also in my day work, I'm seeing, okay, it's sort of its own bottom-up movement. And whenever whenever they ask me, like, okay, I understand I can buy Bitcoin with you guys, for example, at Relay, where I work, but how do I spend it? And I can then go like, oh, you know, you have these options with you guys, or another big promising producer, sorry, I was looking for the word, in Europe is Bitrefill, for example. They often find out about Bitrefill first because they're a bit more present over here. That's where it starts to click, and then it sort of starts to move upwards. So I'm fascinated always if I then speak to fellow Bitcoiners, if they observe the same, if they speak to the media, if there's a keen interest, or if it's really just number go up. So that's less of a question. That's just more of a rant on my end. But I also imagine if number does go up, like we see now, the interest in your guys' product is also increasing, right?
Yes, and sometimes we find this a bit unfortunate. We find it
Yep.
unfortunate people base it on the price. It's almost irrelevant to the price. There's a person who's working at, like I mentioned before, the banana plantation, and they're using the very little time they have for lunch to stand in an enormous line to try to send money back home, and people just they don't see them. It's almost like, okay, whatever, like whatever if they missed like the 3 p.m. cutoff and then they can't do it and someone else is being directly affected. It doesn't matter if it was a mother, if it was the children, if it was a wife, it was a friend, if it was they were trying to start some kind of business with their co-partners, whatever it is. It's almost like people just brush by because I have a certain level of commodity from a first world country, and so who really cares, if these people could really find a lot of use to it and actually solve a real life problem that they have, and genuinely improve their life quality. And so that's where I wish people didn't focus so much on the fact that I think Bitcoin recently hit, what was it, 98,500 or something.
I really
Like,
don't hope we hit the 100K today, because then I have to work overtime. But let me just double check for safety. Okay, 98.9 something. So I might need to work a bit overtime today.
so it keeps going up in price, and sure, it might be fun for us Bitcoiners, but I don't want this to be a shadow that is now over the real core issue, which is solving people's day-to-day life issues. Again, the purpose of the company is to reach a billion people. We don't want to reach a billion people by creating this, oh, well, now invest in Bitcoin. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying you shouldn't. What I am saying is we want to really focus on the person and what issues we can solve in their day-to-day lives, and not so much, okay, well, now it's at 100K. Okay, so what? Did that solve his issue? No. And if it was at 20,000 or even 1,000 or even just $1, it still wouldn't make a difference. Okay. Because to that person, the price doesn't matter. It's just the fact that they can grab cash, change it into Bitcoin, and then send it to their family members. And then they can just cash out immediately. And they're the problem solved. Irrelevant if it was $1 or $100,000 that day. It doesn't matter. And so in that sense, I am very strong on let's solve real life issues. And then, okay, if you are an investor or you're really happy because you bought Bitcoin early, or you're someone who's been saving for your future, amazing. I'm really happy for you that Bitcoin is going up. We also, as a company, we say save, send, and spend. So again, save. We do recommend people to save Bitcoin because it has been the asset that has been increasing better than any other asset. I think all the Bitcoiners are very familiar with this, so I won't go into it. But it's just, I'm not saying this is a bad thing. What I'm saying is it's not our everything, and especially not the price of Bitcoin should be the everything for our consumers.
Yeah, I think you guys as a company, and I imagine also everyone that works there, you're more on that spectrum of a lot of people still see the store of value in Bitcoin, and I think it's more of a scheme. They just see number go up, to be honest, but that's a different topic. And you are already much further. You're in the medium of exchange business where people will use the technology to cash in, cash out, to actually have more at the end of the day, because they don't lose it to the fees to Western Union and all of these remittances programs. And they can actually use it for what it was intended to be, a peer-to-peer cash electronic system. Would you like, if that would be a bill now, would you sign that or co-sign that you see it more as a medium of exchange? Or are you guys generally open and say like, hey, we don't care if they're using it to save, spend, or even use it as a store, as a unit of account? Or do you have like these debates team internally also as to what it actually is?
In the company, we save, send, and spend. So I wouldn't sign off one, sign off all of these. Me personally, not on the side on behalf of the company. I really don't care what Bitcoin is being used for, so long as it's solving real life problems. So in that sense, if you're using it to invest for your future, or you're using it to, I don't know, play a video game, or you're using it to try to sell your art, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter to me. So long as you're using it to solve some kind of real life problem, I think it's great. Again, so long as it's not illegal, I don't think you're doing anything wrong, and I really think it's just fine as a technology. The only thing that I would say is I hope people can find this use case in such a way where they're actually benefiting themselves, and maybe not so much so just trying to speculate to try to solve other life problems. As in, I hope you don't just rely on the fact of Bitcoin going up in price to try to solve the issue that you have been unemployed for the past 7 years. Like,
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
one thing where it's like, I hope Bitcoin can complement your life and not be your everything. And I think that that was something that was pretty clearly stated in the white paper, which said that the financial system actually works. Again, this is not an attempt to try to uh, in any way destroy the financial system. I love the financial system. I use it on a daily basis. This is truly just a compliment, and I hope that people can really see it as that. So don't just, because Bitcoin is outperforming every other asset, just fall on top of Bitcoin and say, you know what, nothing else matters. Like, I don't have to self-improve as a human being. I don't have to socialize. I don't I don't have to leave my house. I could just stay in my basement and do nothing for like the next 2 decades. What I am saying is, let Bitcoin help you accelerate anything you're already doing. That's what I really hope people can use it. Like, find it as a tool who can like help you and boost your already like fast car, and use it as turbo and not necessarily to replace the motor.
I think for a lot of people, and I know this could be a trigger for many watching, I think Bitcoin makes a certain type of person actually more lazy, because it's exactly what you say. Like, I can stay in the basement for the next 20 years and it's outperforming everything based on what we've experienced now. I mean, you never know in the future, right? Maybe we
Nobody
just
knows.
stay at 100,000 for like 100 years. And that mindset is then often, I think, pretty dangerous, because it takes away, curiosity, it takes away exploring, and also like living life. I have way too many Bitcoin friends who, they don't go out, they don't meet friends for exactly that reason. Like, oh, I can stack like 50K more sats this month. I go like, yeah, but at one point, like, you should embrace life, what it offers you, and whatever your interests are. It's like you say, maybe it's sports, maybe it's something else, and you shouldn't hold back, I guess, there. So yeah, again, just a comment from my end. What I am curious about is, to get back to Costa Rica and what we spoke about before hitting record. I actually found your story up on the website while you were chatting before, and in there you're quoting that my hairdresser asked me to help him set up a Bitcoin wallet. Is that a recurring thing you see locally more and more, that like brick and mortar shops just use Bitcoin, ideally through you guys? Or is there like, can you categorize it? Who's like using it? Or is it really just from the business guy down to, or the banker down to the banana plant farmer, everyone is using it?
I think that it's more, I don't know if this is positive or negative, but more so mouth to mouth, word to word, grassroots.
Mm-hmm.
When my hairdresser asked me, it's because he knew what I was doing. He had heard, he had like maybe gone into the website, and then he's like, oh, you know what? I like this. This makes sense. But that's because he knows me. He's been my hairdresser for quite some time. I really like his work. We have a personal relationship. And so when he finds Bitcoin through me is a very different experience of finding Bitcoin through the internet, or maybe finding Bitcoin through the big media outlets, or maybe finding Bitcoin through a stranger per se, or maybe finding Bitcoin through a company. That's also a different experience, because which company and what are their goals. And so each one of those is a very different way of finding Bitcoin. And so you could say that his rabbit hole story was finding Bitcoin through a friend, which in this case is me. And that really does shape the way that someone might perceive it in the future, because a lot of the times it's not even the technology, because the technology is the same, but it's how every environment makes you feel, i.e. it's not the same to find about a subject at work than it might be through your friends or through a family member. It's just different emotional experiences that you can have. And so I think that because he felt so safe when he was talking to me and he sees that I'm just one of his clients, he
Mm.
felt a lot more compelled to say, you know what, I really like this, help me out. He was just like I just walk into the store one day. He's like, "Hey, I want to open up a Bitcoin wallet," and I looked back, like, was that for me? Like, that's so unexpected. We'd never spoken about this before. Um, and so that's kind of how it happened. He just came to his own conclusion and he wanted to get started. And so I think that a lot of the times it does happen this way. It's you meet someone, they might be involved in the space. Again, it wasn't your everything. It just happened to be a complement to your life. And then they're like, why am I not using this for my business? Obviously, I should start using this for my business. And throughout their own ideas and incentives, they want to start using Bitcoin and they'll ask you, hey, I want to get started, and so on. More rarely do you see uh, have I found people that started through Bitcoin like myself, where it's like you're just out of curiosity in the internet going through every wormhole you can find, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I found this white paper, makes sense, let's just invest your entire career into it. Like, I haven't found that many people. For the most part, everyone seems to find it through a friend, or it's more of a grassroots operation. And so I would say that everyone you touch is someone you can influence, so try to influence them for the better, and just be yourself. And if you are yourself, then it's more likely that people will want to follow along.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the interpersonal onboardings, let's call them, are always the best. And my experience has found if the friends really want to get on because they know you, so that trust is there, they'll actually stick around. Like, they're not the ones then dumping once, the media calls it dead again. They're actually the ones who go like, it may be dipping or anything if they look at the price. But I'll trust you there. And especially if they see that as a business, they go like, wow, this has helped me get, new clients. It gives me new opportunities. Or it just helps me from a financial standpoint to prop up the company, depending on when they got in. So I think if we want to make Bitcoin great again, to use one of the marketing claims by another company, we really should nail down the friends and family and the, as you said, the grassroots stuff. Like, we don't have to force it on people. But if they ask you, obviously be of a helping hand. Before we hit record, you mentioned that you also used to play tennis. And I'm always fascinated if I have people on who have a background, in the business world, or in this case, the sports world. What are the familiarities for you from tennis to Bitcoin? Is there anything you learned in tennis where you go like, oh, I could use this from day one in Bitcoin now? Or have you maybe discovered something again, which you've learned in the previous life, to say, due to tennis and Bitcoin again?
I think one of the things that I found is that it's not as mystical as people imagine it to be. So I think
Ooh.
that a lot of the times when you're on the court and you're playing a tennis match, there are certain things that are mystical about it, because it's very difficult to explain to people, well, I didn't actually hear anything anyone said. Like, you actually
Mm-hmm.
stop listening to the noise in the crowd. It is a little bit like the movies, but it's like you're focused, you're psychologically there, and so you're not paying attention to someone said, oh, someone said something, or someone XYZ, something was happening in the surrounding area. So you're like, I didn't even notice. I was so focused. And so that's what it is. So in that sense, you could say it's mystical. Bitcoin kind of has that mystical aspect to it, as in it's really amazing that this exists and the fact that it
Mm-hmm.
actually went through and that it's working. So in that sense, yes, quite mystical. But unmystified in the sense that tennis is just a sport. And if you are not disciplined, or you don't put in the right hours, and you don't actually compete, and you don't lose, and you don't learn how to stand up and win again, because in tennis, unlike in other sports, you play a tournament every single week. And then if you're not winning, you're losing. So
Mm-hmm.
you lose every single week. And if you're playing tennis matches as training, which is something that I did and many people did, you lose every day. So if
Yeah.
you're not comfortable with the idea of like reinventing yourself and putting in discipline and hard work to try to get somewhere, then you're probably not going to go very far in tennis. And I would say that Bitcoin is kind of the same, in the sense that in the business world, if you're not willing to lose and, make mistakes, and essentially be at a difficult situation and kind of reinvent yourself every single day over and over and over again and have that discipline, you may not go as far either. Again, you can play tennis recreationally or you can use and do business recreationally, but you're probably not going to reach the highest levels if you're not willing to put in the work and essentially take a slap to the face. And so in that sense, very, very, very similar, both mystically and unmystically.
Do you there was this football star guy who's now also, or he did accept a lot of Bitcoin as a salary, and he's been fighting a bit. Like they've been ridiculing him. He's not laughing now, at least in terms if you price it in fiat. Are there tennis players you know of who are also interested in Bitcoin stuff? I'm just curious now if it has also grasped this part of the world already.
Unfortunately, from the professional tour, no. Now, I could probably go to like one of the local tennis coaches and say, hey, you should probably set Bitcoin. But then again, most of his clients coming from country clubs and so on probably wouldn't just pay him with Bitcoin. So it'd be very unlikely. I'm not saying we can't look or try to find a use case for it, but more less likely than likely. Again, if it was one of my friends, maybe they would be like, hey, can I pay you with Bitcoin? But that's not really the point. That wouldn't really necessarily be like mass adoption. That's more like a grassroots initiatives. So we should like try to keep things separate and say, okay, well, this is something where it's actually like been adopted. People are using it. There's a very strong use case for it versus we just want to like orange pill the planet, which is also okay, but it's a different section.
Yeah, and I guess if friends come to you for tennis advice and they pay in Bitcoin, it's probably that they're going to pay you in Bitcoin and not the other way around, right?
I don't think they want to pay me in Bitcoin. They don't want to lose their Bitcoin either. So it's like they're trying to teach fiat for sure. Like they don't. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay to orange pill people and for them not to want to give you Bitcoin. I wouldn't want to give them Bitcoin myself. So we understand each other.
That's nice. That's nice. Before we head to the end of the show, we like to end every episode on a little bit of a challenge for our guests. You know the saying that all roads lead back to Bitcoin, and we want to prove this. So I'm going to give you now a word or a phrase, and you have to relate that back to Bitcoin somehow. And I thought with your career in tennis, it would be a great opportunity to use serve as a word to relate back to Bitcoin.
Okay, very, very interesting. Serve. Well, you serve to win a tennis match, but you also can use the word in a different way, which is you serve people by solving their day-to-day life problems. And so serving can be both something that you use to win and to express like, oh, like when you ace, it's basically like you served and the ball went through and nobody even touched it. So that's really cool. But also serving is in the sense of trying to serve the other person and try to just connect with them on a different level and do things for them. So it can be both to like use to like to beat the person as well as to help the person. And so in that sense, I guess it could be related to Bitcoin.
Nice. I like that. I like that you did it. I first wanted to go for ace because I was like ace in the hole. You know, Bitcoin is the ace in the hole for everyone, or the ace underneath the sleeve or whatever. But yeah, I like the serve in terms of the serve in tennis and serving people. That's great. If people want to find out more about Azteco or you, where can they find you online?
Please go to azte.co. That is Azteco. In our website, you can find all information that you would like about us. And then if you want to follow me, you can just go to @Tania Lea __ on Instagram. Or you could just type in Tania Lea Bitcoin on Google Chrome, and I'm sure something will find up, whether it's my LinkedIn or other social media accounts.
Perfect. You're actually the first guest who proposed his Instagram, thinking about it now. I like that. I like that we're seeing more, because everyone is like, you find me on Nostr, you find me on X, it's the going thing. But yeah, and I will definitely include the links in the show notes below. Thanks for your time, Tania, and also thanks for getting in touch, for arranging the interview. And hope you're getting on board as many people as possible with Azteco, and you get to that 1 billion as fast as possible. And also thanks to our lovely viewers and listeners for their time. We all know it's the most scarce asset. And as always, guys, it's important to stay curious.